many people know, I really believe it's an absolute honour and a thrill to perform in front of the British monarchy. Whatever people say, it can do your career so much good. As the American superstar and, of course, Hollywood actor, good all-round entertainer, and to me, one of the most talented people ever to grace a stage, Sammy Davis Jr. pointed out that when he appeared on his very first Royal Variety show, doors even opened for him that he didn't know existed, simply because going back to America, people were saying, what was it like? That sort of thing. Jack Benny said the same thing. Everybody understood that just to appear in front of the British monarchy was very good. And I'm sure it's the same in any country that has a monarchy. It just opens doors because people are intrigued. And the start of like a Royal Variety performance is very nerve-wracking backstage. I remember Michael Crawford telling me that because he was on so late in the bill, he had to share a dressing room with people, and they were rather limited for conveniences, so he had to keep dashing around to the pole. And apparently people thought, oh my goodness, he's a drinker, but it was the only place he could go to, shall we say, yes, solve a problem, you know what I mean? And you just kind of think, wow, was it really that bad? I love Michael Crawford though, he's a brilliant guy, good friend as well. I hope you keep it well if you're watching this, Michael, I know you do. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because on November the 15th, 1837, the very first time that Queen Victoria attended the theatre as the monarch was at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, and she saw a musical operetta and then a farce. Now, what was interesting about this was significant because prior to that, she'd often gone to the theatre as a young princess, and obviously with her husband Prince Albert, he was a big fan of it. But this was totally different. This was game-changing, for Queen Victoria, because at the time, you can imagine going from Buckingham Palace in those carriages and all that sort of stuff to the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, is the most haunted theatre in London. Yes, I have that on good authority from Bonnie Langford. She's seen the ghosts. More about that later. Now, where it gets interesting is when she arrived, there was the royal box, and at first they were going to sort of put like a curtain around so that she could just see out and people couldn't see it. And she said, oh, no. These people need to see me. And, I want to see them. I want to see whether they're enjoying the performance and all that sort of stuff. And what was fascinating was they quickly had to redesign the royal box to make sure that this is exactly what the monarch received. And I can understand that. Now, apparently, this didn't go down too well with everybody as part of the production. See, actors can be very funny people, let me tell you. I'm not an actor. I would consider myself to be more of a vaudeville variety comedian type turn. But actors, yes, they like people to just notice them, stick to the script, that type of thing. Now, what they didn't like, apparently, when Queen Victoria was in the royal box as the first time as monarch, everybody was just sort of like looking there, just looking to the royal box. If there was a funny line, was she laughing? And it still really goes on today. If you go to the Royal Variety Show, everybody's looking at the royal box. Is the king laughing? Is Catherine laughing? That sort of thing. Everybody's curious as to what they think. Now, what happened was some of the actors on the very first visit stood back when she went along the line to thank them backstage, and she didn't understand this. So then she said, well, look, let's do it a different way next time. So the bottom line was she pointed out that as she was sitting there, she made sure that she could be visually seen, but she was fully intent on watching the performers so that the audience would follow her direction. And they got rapturous applause. And apparently this worked so well in her favour. The one thing, though, that Queen Victoria wouldn't do was to go to the music hall. As I've told you before, this was favoured very much by her son, the king, the future king, of course, Edward VII. He loved the music hall for all the right reasons, as you can imagine. And she felt that this was beneath her as a monarch. But, it wasn't, and nobody could persuade her, including apparently Disraeli at the time, who could possibly persuade her to do anything. She said, no, it wouldn't be fitting for her to be sitting there with all that raucous singing and dancing and drinking. And it was such a shame because I think it would have done a lot for that particular genre. But either way, once again, when you look back at the sort of history and you look back in time, you can see how Queen Victoria shaped the future of what we now see to be the traditional Royal Command, Royal Variety performance. This was one woman definitely very much ahead of her time. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.